Before the video starts, just a quick reminder to go check out the Chilling app. If you can't get enough content from me here on this channel, myself and other narrators here on YouTube are going to be providing hours of unique and spine-tingling scary story narrations exclusively over on the Chilling app. There's new narrations from me added weekly, and there's new professional narrators constantly being added to the list. So far, there's over 400 stories to binge, from monsters, paranormal, thrillers, and true scary stories. The Chilling app even recently added classic novels, vintage horror radio, and true crime stories. And this all can be enjoyed with their one-of-a-kind ambient menu, where you can mix in immersive and relaxing sound effects like rainstorms and crackling fireplaces, and adjust their volumes independently, and a sleep timer so you can drift off to dreamland without interruptions. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment to try the free trial of the Chilling app, and after that, it's only $2.99 a month, which makes it completely ad and interruption free. This happened to me in the summer of 2015. I was dating a guy who lived in the city, and I was living at home at the time in the suburbs. Neither of us had a car, and since I lived at home with my bedroom right next to my grandma's, I always went to him. I take the subway to his place every week and stay for the couple of days I had off from work. To get to his apartment required taking 2 trains. One day I was headed to see him. It was super hot out and I was wearing a skirt with straps, a crop top, and knee-high socks. Hey, I wanted to look cute. I guess I feel this is important as I probably stood out in this outfit, and unfortunately, I probably should have been more careful about what I was wearing, which sucks. I'm on the first train, and after a few stops, I noticed a man get on. It was kind of hard not to notice him, as he chose to stand right in front of where I was sitting and stare at me, rather than take an empty seat. It made me feel weird. The man in general gave me a very creepy vibe. He was probably in his early 40s, looked unkempt, but otherwise kinda just a basic-looking white dude whose face I can't even picture right now. So I get off at the last stop and head through the station to where I need to catch the second train, but I notice this guy is following me, which at first I figured wasn't a big deal. He could have just been going to the same place. So to get to the platform I needed to be at, you had to go up some stairs, and I realize he's right behind me. I decided to turn around and go to a different platform, which happened to be packed with people. Thinking if he's following me, then this is bad, but maybe I could lose him in the crowd. He continues to follow me, and I try to duck out of view before going back to the actual platform I need to be waiting on. I get there, and for a few minutes I feel better, until I see him again. He must have known that I'd be there after I'd gone up there and then turned around. Plus, it was the only other platform, and most likely he saw me the whole time. There weren't too many people waiting compared to the other side, but a few trains came that were so full that I didn't bother to try to get on, and neither did he. The whole time I'm texting my boyfriend, who is not taking me seriously at all. I asked that he at least meet me at the station when I got to the stop by his apartment, which was a 5-minute walk, and was being reluctant, but he finally agreed. At this point, though, I'm still waiting for a train. One does come, but it's very full. I'm getting restless and want to get to a safe place, so I squeeze on. But so does the man, and now he's right next to me, with now his arm over me. I can even feel his fingers starting to caress my shoulder. It was disgusting. I decide that even with all these people around, I'm not safe, so right before the doors close, I hop out, and the train leaves with the guy on it, staring at me with this look of hatred as it pulled away. I waited for a few more trains to come and go, worried the guy would be waiting for me at the next stop or something. I got on a train finally, paying attention to everyone who got on at each stop. He never did, and I made it to my stop, greeted by my boyfriend, who seemed frustrated by having to walk over. He is my ex-boyfriend and was just generally kind of terrible. I'm really proud of myself of getting off of that train at the last second. I don't know how much danger I was in, but I know that man was following me and definitely wasn't for any wholesome reason. And despite being in public, I feel like if he had tried anything, no one would have done anything. and I'm a very small and not a very assertive individual, so I imagine I wouldn't have said anything, and they would have just let it happen. I seem to be a magnet for creeps and weirdos, and since I got such a positive response in my last experience, I figured I would share a few more with you all. These all took place outside my home at the time, which was on the literal last block of a major city, right across the street from the beach. The building was framed on 4 sides by the beach, the woods, a construction site, and a few other sleepy houses, as well as the Mooney Line. Think like the subway, but above ground. It's the very last stop on the Mooney, so unless you catch it at the right time of day or at the height of tourist season, the area is basically empty on the sidewalks. The house itself has an initial patio door, which doesn't always fully close if you don't slam it, and then an entry area with a staircase and leading up to a second locked door that leads to the apartment. Now, for experience 1, I got home from work one day at about 9 p.m., and immediately get into a small spat with my roommates. After about 30 minutes, I decided to leave the house to cool off. I had planned on sitting on the porch outside, but as I looked across the street at the ocean, I decided it would be more peaceful there. I had never been to the beach at night for safety reasons, but as I looked at the well-lit parking lot and no one in sight, I decided it would be all right. In the 1-block span from the beach to my home, there was a little wooded path that started on my street and dumped you out at a crosswalk for the beach. It also intersected with another pathway that took you down the coast. I sat for a bit. Everything was fine, and after a while I started the less than 1-minute walk back on the little path. All of a sudden, I look up and see a man walking briskly on the intersecting path, looking right at me. I speed up a bit and try to ignore him, and as we hit the section where the 2 paths intersect, I end up being about a foot away from him. He calls out to me, "Hey, I want to talk to you." I ignore him, and after a few more steps, he reaches out his hand and grabs part of my hair, saying, "Hey, come here." I immediately yank my hair out of his hand and book it to the last block, sprinting to my house, and I can actually hear him running behind me. I turn the corner sharply and am briefly out of his sight. Luckily, the initial entryway to the patio had been left open by accident, and I run in through the door and slam it shut. I hear his footsteps stop outside, followed by silence. As I go upstairs and look through our front window, I see him walking away into the construction site. Experience number 2. I had a friend that lived a couple of blocks from where I was along the same stretch of beach. After hanging out one day, I decided to head back home at around sunset. I've walked this route many times, and it's just barely light outside still, only a 5-minute walk, so I figured I'll be home before dark. As I cross the intersection from their house, I notice a white van parked on the corner that is not usually there, covering a little garden I like to look at on my way back. I can just barely make out 2 people in the front seat. I think it odd, okay, whatever, and I pull out my pepper spray just in case. I cross the street, passing the van, and now have my back to it. As soon as my foot hits the pavement on the other side of the street, I hear the van start up. I turn my head just slightly and see them illegally turning onto the street where I'm now walking. They creep the van beside me slowly, just behind me but within my peripheral vision. I decide to stop and let them pass. I pause and pretend to be looking at my phone and see them stop driving immediately. This was an immediate nope for me, and I broke into a run, with the van in pursuit. I went to a small, vintage motel about 1 building away that I know has an open entrance courtyard, and so as I approach it, I turn quickly into the yard and run up to an archway entry for a unit. I stop at the first few steps, catching my breath, and I open my phone's front camera to use as a sort of mirror to see what the van is doing. They had backed up to the entry of the motel and sat there for a few minutes. Then, one of the passenger sides opened the door and started walking towards the motel, his phone flashlight on, and I immediately pulled my own phone back, listening for his footsteps and readying myself to start banging on the motel door, hoping that someone is inside. I waited in the silence for a long time, long enough for it to get dark. I finally look out again and both the man and the van are gone. I call an Uber to take me the last 2 blocks home, and I never saw them again. Experience number 3. I have a friend over and we want to take a dab. It's about 10 p.m. My roommates don't like dabbing in the house because of the smell, so he and I go to his parked car out front. We're in there having a good time when I notice a person walking down the block, pulling on car door handles. I notify him and we watch as that same person comes up to his car and yanks on his back door. He honks his horn and they back up for a minute, then walk up to his driver window and knock on the window, making a motion to roll it down. Just as I'm about to tell him don't, he rolls down the window a bit. The person is clean and normally clothed and asks what day it is, and then what time it is, to which my friend answers. They then stand there and stare at us as he tries to usher them away, even offering them money. Without saying anything, they walk away down the block, and once they reach the intersection between the construction site and woods, they roll their head back up to the sky and just start screaming at the top of their lungs as they back away out of sight. I take this opportunity to dart back inside my house as my friend watches, making sure to close the patio door. A few hours later, one of my roommates comes home very drunk, and as we figured later, they failed to make sure the patio door shut all the way. Morning time comes and I wake up in an empty apartment. I open my phone and have a singular message from my roommate from 3 hours ago, stating that when they left for work this morning, there was a person they didn't know sleeping inside the patio area. They thought it was a drunk person who lived in the neighborhood and entered the wrong house by mistake, and evidently did not find it enough of a reason to call me or wake me up. I immediately go to the entry of our apartment, pulling the door open fast. To my surprise, the person who had been talking to us in the car the night before is laying casually across my staircase, fiddling with something. I scream "Hey" loudly, and they immediately hop up and run out of my patio door. I run down the stairs after them and open the door. They're standing across the street, just smiling at me and giggling. They then give me a little wave and run off. I close the door hard and go back to the steps to see what items they had left. Sitting on the steps was a few coins, some weird wire-type objects. Think a bobby pin after you've bent it into a straight line. A lighter and a pocket knife. Thankfully, I never saw them again. It all started on a normal weekend evening. I was hanging out in my room when I suddenly got a text from my friend. He worked as overnight security for a large bank and regularly had time between rounds to check his phone and play Pokemon Go. The message he sent me was that I needed to lock my doors. I asked why, and he explained that only a block from me was a shootout and the offender had yet to be apprehended. Something you should know about my neighborhood is that this is not a bad part of town. My house is in a nice neighborhood just down the street from a local high school. We have a large military family presence due to the base in the area. I'm only telling you this because it's easy enough to find this all out if you were to research the event I'm about to tell you. So after my friend messages me this, I head upstairs and do what he says. As I'm doing so, I open Facebook and I suddenly see that everyone on my timeline is sharing the local police scanner report, and it goes as follows. Fire, active shooter. Sonic, street name. U-Haul full of fireworks on fire by the building with an active shooter inside. Dispatch on the phone with 2 shooting victims inside. Male suspect in an army helmet still shooting. Police giving local hospital a heads up that they have an active shooter with multiple Code 3 traumas that will be coming. I'm sitting on the steps in front of my front door reading this and constantly refreshing the page when I suddenly recognize the sound of a helicopter above my house. The Sonic drive-through this incident is happening at is, like I said, only a block from my house. I tell my parents, and my mother and I can't help but stick our heads out, only to see our neighbors are doing the same. It was nighttime, and off beyond the tree line you could clearly see the orange glow of what I knew was a U-Haul the shooter had set on fire in the parking lot of the Sonic. We close the door and For a few hours, I'm refreshing the scanner feed and watching Snapchat videos people have took of the U-Haul in question, on fire with dozens of police cars flashing lights around the area. The shooter was soon apprehended, and my mother and I felt relieved, and I headed to bed, still buzzing from the excitement. That excitement was quickly extinguished when I got a call the next day from a friend of mine who told me that our mutual friend and his roommate were killed in the shooting the night before. I was stunned into silence. It wasn't until I got the invitation to his memorial that everything crashed into me at once. And here's the story behind that awful night. A few days beforehand, a Sonic employee reported a man trying to buy $44 of food with a stolen credit card. The man was arrested and spent a few days in the local jail. The day he got out, he rented the U-Haul, filled it with fireworks, grabbed his military-grade weaponry, and drove back to that Sonic. He set the U-Haul on fire in order to cause a distraction and walked into the building in the Sonic where my friend and two of his coworkers were and opened fire with a semi-automatic. In an interview with the only survivor, he said, "I watched as my friend died next to me. There was blood and I just watched." At his memorial, I listened and watched as so many family and friends spoke about him. I knew I wanted to say something. I was shaking and crying as I stumbled to the front of the room in front of the microphone. His mother and stepfather were sitting in front of me as I began by describing that night, then went into detail about how I first met him, how he looked so strange at this Midwestern high school with long flipped hair, band t-shirts, and dark skinny jeans. How he said I looked beautiful in my homecoming dress the night he took me as his date. It was the first time in my life I've ever been so affected by something. My already bad drug addiction completely spiraled even deeper. My friend didn't deserve to die. He was originally from Texas, and when his family moved back to Texas, he chose to stay here to explore his independence. He loved his family, but especially his older brother, who he looked up to. His brother always affectionately called him Nano and would always call and text him to make sure my friend was doing okay. My friend also had an amazing natural talent for music. His guitar was his safe place, and he only ever shared his playing with his friends and family. His biggest influence was Jimi Hendrix, who he admired and would talk for hours about how amazing his stage presence was and how his hands were so big he could wrap it twice around the neck of his guitar. But my friend never really got a chance to pursue music, despite each and every person who ever heard him sing and play him tell him he was extraordinary. Not only that, he was so kind, and he was also so unhappy. It was a few days before Thanksgiving when he died. I learned that his family was already going to be driving up here to pick him up and take him home to Texas with them. He was scheduled to finally get his license that Monday after spending years after high school not being able to practice or have the time. His family did make it up here to take him home, but in a casket. This all happened only a year ago. The Sonic has been reopened and a memorial has been erected in the sitting area. But just across the street, next to a parking lot, is a small memorial made by friends and family of not only him, but the other boy that died that night. His picture is framed by Mexican prayer candles, fake flowers, and during the holidays, the tree is hung with stockings with his name on it. I drive by it every time I go to work, and it's just another reminder that he's gone. All over $44 of food. This incident happened just a few hours earlier, and I'm typing this story currently at my workplace. I work in the garden area of a home improvement store. I don't work the cash registers, and my manager doesn't even let me water the flowers, so a lot of the time I have nothing to do. This results in me taking extremely long bathroom breaks where I just scroll on my phone. I know it sounds bad, but it's better than standing around trying to look busy. Today was the same as any other, with me wasting time in the bathroom. Nothing of interest happened until my work phone buzzed at the same time as the stall next to mine, and this becomes important later. A few seconds later, I see that the guy in the next stall has his hand stretched to the ground with his palm facing up. At first, I thought he had run out of toilet paper and was asking for mine. He just stayed silent for a while, so I ignored him after that. Then he started moving that hand uncomfortably close to my leg, so I immediately scooted away and prepared to leave. Once the man noticed that, he hurriedly got out of his stall before I could leave. Another few seconds of silence. I took a peek out from the gap of the stall door to see what he was doing, and just like a scene from a horror movie, our eyes connected. He was barely an inch away from the door, trying to peek inside. My blood ran cold, and if you're wondering why I didn't immediately open the door and cuss the guy out, I really hate confrontation. I avoid it whenever possible, and I do my best not to draw attention to myself. I stood sideways by the door so he wouldn't be able to see me, and that's when the whispering started. I don't know what the first thing he said was, but it sounded like moaning. The next part was a bit more audible. He said something along the lines of wanting to see more of my unflushed toilet paper. And I was just thoroughly disgusted. This guy was a complete creep, and I was alone in the bathroom with him. My heart was beating faster by the second. I had to stay there until another person came into the bathroom. No way was I going to confront him alone. And probably a minute later, someone finally arrives, and I take this as my chance to wash my hands and get out of there. Thankfully, the presence of the other person made the old man quit his creepy behavior. As I was about to leave, he blocked my path for a quick second before stepping aside. The weird thing was, I don't even think he works at the store because he wasn't wearing any vest. My store is extremely lenient about uniform, but most workers at least wear a vest or something connected to the store. He just looked like a regular customer. I'm certain I heard a phone ding echo in that bathroom. The phones have a certain signature ring to them that it couldn't have been a coincidence. Either way, he only started creeping on me once the phone ring made it clear that I was an employee. The situation really creeped me out, and I've been totally unfocused on my work since then. I kept prowling the garden area to look out for any old man wearing a similar outfit to that creeper. And I have an incredibly hard time distinguishing faces, so I don't even know if I would recognize this apparent creepy coworker if he showed up again. I was living in Berlin, Germany, and my boyfriend at the time lived about a 5-hour drive away. So I had planned to go see him, like I usually do every 2 weeks on the weekend, and I used the carpooling site BlaBlaCar, which I had used so many times before. I see that a young man is heading down that way and that there is already one seat taken by another girl, so I reserve my seat and wait for this person to come and fetch me. We meet at the spot we had agreed to, and he explains to me that the other girl had to cancel last minute, which is totally fine. Odd, but I mean, it can happen. Anyway, I jump in. The driver, his name is Ben, he seems very nice and talkative. Just before leaving Berlin, he turns to me and asks that he had forgotten his driver's license at home and that we must go fetch it, which is already a bit of a pain because it's on the other side of town and Berlin is huge. And let's be honest, you know you are going away for the whole weekend and that you have a really big journey and somehow you forget your license. Weird. But moving on, we get to his and he parks up and turns to me and says, "Would you like to come with me and visit my place?" Immediately, I say no thank you. And off we go. He's talking away and all of a sudden he starts touching my thigh and explains that he's a personal trainer and masseuse, and I just respond with something like, "Cool for you." I made it quite clear that I was heading to my boyfriend's and I was not comfortable. He continues touching my hands, my thighs, and my neck, and to the point that I actually considered, do I jump out? I mean, I'm on the motorway, already about 2 hours away from Berlin, and it's traffic jam-packed, so 5 hours ended up being 7 hours. My plan was to pretend to be asleep. I thought that way, I don't have to interact with him and he might leave me alone. The thing is, I really did fall asleep, and when I woke up, I realized I was in the middle of nowhere, like on tiny roads in the middle of the forest, and the guy turns to me and says, "You know, if I wanted to, I could kidnap you and take you anywhere I wanted in those woods." I put up a tough exterior and said, "You don't scare me. and I've planned for all situations. Just know that. He took notice, and my boyfriend gave me a call at that exact moment, and I explained what was going on and kept him posted. So as we drove out of these woods, he decides that, no, it's time to eat, so we lose another 45 minutes while he does his own thing getting food. I basically tell him that I'm fed up and want no more stops, and he tells me that he's tired and that in order to do so and to keep him awake, I must massage him. I felt totally stuck, so just to briefly entertain him, I touched his neck as to say, okay, now move. He did so, and we arrived finally. My boyfriend was not there waiting for me because I didn't want him to fight. I got out as quick as I could. I felt disgusted with myself, but I reported him to the carpooling site, and as far as I know, he was banned. I'm living in a very rural area in a small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, it just takes you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. Now, it was Christmas Day. In the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk as we were really stuffed from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we left, and we had a big and bright LED flashlight with us. I also took my camera and my flash as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small graveled cycled track close to the forest border, which connects our village and the next, maybe 15 to 20 minute walk between villages. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the track close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed to the light inside of the car and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure, and I asked my partner to point the flashlight up towards it so I could focus better and photograph it with my flash. As I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing behind us in the middle of the road. He's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally because at this time in the evening and close to the border of the forest there are boars sometimes, and it's mating season, so they are more aggressive than usual. Indeed, there was a man standing behind us, staying out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. It wasn't even legal to drive on that path with your car, by the way. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and still just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that it wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for his behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to just get out and follow the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes until we reached it. I remembered the letters on his license plate, not the numbers though, unfortunately, and Googled it, and it turned out that he was from a city about 6 hours from our village. Mind you, the country I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you are only allowed to travel, even by car, if you have very urgent reasons. After we reached the first lantern of the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he parked there again and turned the lights off, and he didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone battery is low, so I didn't want to call the police back then, but I called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details. This is a big regret that I didn't memorize the whole license plate, but It was just so surprising that I seriously didn't think about it. Also, it only occurred to me as really strange when I thought about the frozen windows and that he couldn't have possibly have walked behind us. Plus, him having no lights and not responding at all. He did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what he had in mind being so far away from where he was, and what could have happened to me if I was alone. So to start off, I'm 16 and haven't had a job yet. I really want to work. I need to get out of the house. I got an interview at Popeyes in my city. I get there at around 5 minutes before my interview, and I have really bad social anxiety and struggle to speak in certain situations. By the time it was my turn to be interviewed, my nails had been gnawed off. I was very shaky and I could hear it in my voice. I had been listening to what the previous girl had said. I like examples of what to say and do, and so I thought I was ready. No masks were worn, mid-COVID, and this man did not put on his mask. Red flag number 1 in my mind. He was also looking towards places where I was trying to maintain eye contact. I had one of the mom cardigans on, so I crossed it over my chest. When I did get his attention, it finally fell back on my face where it should be, especially since I'm a minor, and he did know that. He bit his lip a lot and would sigh weirdly, like it was a moan. Obviously uncomfortable, I tried to take his attention from me onto some random questions. I started to ask about the restaurant and things like that. He answered very dismissively. In the end, I got the job. I was told an email was going to be sent to me within the next day or two with my login info so I could get started on training. This was an important detail. I gave it 2 days and I received nothing. I call and they tell me to call back in the next day at 3 because he's out of town. I go to high school full time and I don't get out until almost 4, but by the time I called, he had gone. I called multiple more times to no avail. I called that Saturday and he finally answers. He starts telling me how I was supposed to stay after the meeting and get my login info from the assistant manager. And that's when I'd had enough. I'm already very short-tempered and I had given this man every ounce that I had. Listen, man, I applied here and you said I was hired. You also said I would receive an email with my info. I was not given that or any other way to contact you urgently, not to mention how unprofessional it is to lie to a now employee. You are an unprofessional man and a creep. I suggest you start focusing more on... Excuse me, ma'am, but No, you listen to me. Focus on hiring people and not the chests of obviously underage applicants. I told him to take my file out of the system and to screw off. I hung up before he could say another word. Multiple emails were sent afterward, belittling me in some extremely unprofessional behavior. I blocked the sender's email and still continued to receive more. Multiple calls were made to my own mother by this man, and we reported him, and we had heard back that he had since been fired. So a note to all hiring managers: when you make a mistake, own up to it. Don't lie to new employees. We're not stupid. This happened just a couple of hours ago. I'm currently in bed trying to sleep off the bad feeling from this encounter. At around 11, I was watching TV and playing on my phone, just waiting to feel tired. My boyfriend was upstairs asleep in bed. The lights were all off on the house, just a lamp on in the living room with me. Someone flicked my letterbox on the front door. It was loud, so I assumed my partner would have heard it and came to see. We live in a pretty unsafe area in a poor city in England. I've been followed, charged at by mental drug addicts, attempted mugging, catcalled, found a drunk man hiding in my back garden, found a man loitering in my front garden, all that kind of weird stuff, so I instantly was on edge. I went to look at the front door. It was textured glass panels, so I was able to make out 2 silhouettes out by the door. I just stood and watched and saw that one of them was looking into our front room, trying to see what was inside. They must have been there 30 seconds, then I flicked the hall light on, not wanting them to think the house was empty, and They instantly scarpered from looking on my front room to the street. A few seconds later, they started knocking on my door, so I ran upstairs and had to wake up my parents because I did not want to open the door and was so scared they would bash it in. I looked out the bedroom window and there was a man in the street. He looked up at me and held eye contact without blinking or looking away even for a millisecond. He was speaking slowly. I mouthed "what" once or twice, hoping he would shout, but he didn't. Thinking back, I wonder if he was looking at me but talking to the other person he had with him. I rushed down to confront them. My partner came down and started to put some clothes on. By the time I had grabbed my keys and opened the door, they had gone. No sign of them at all on the road. This isn't the first time someone had tried messing with my letter flap at night. Last time I answered with my partner and they had some nonsensical reason which seemed made up on the spot. So now I'm thinking they're testing houses to see which ones are empty for robbing. But whatever the reason, the way that man looked at me was incredibly unsettling, and I really hope he doesn't come back. This happened probably around 2002. I moved to Belfast from London. I would have been like maybe 11. I'm 30 now. Anyway, I lived in a new area. A lot of houses, etc. were being built, and they were all massive and beautiful houses despite being a terrible area, and I thankfully no longer lived in. I'm with a friend called Dave. We're looking for my sister, and we go around the corner from my house down where they're building a bunch of houses, and it's pretty dark. I'd probably say it's like 10 or 11 p.m. I don't really remember why we were actually looking for my sister. I don't even think she was around. Anyway, we're walking past houses that look pretty much finished. We're chatting, and a guy randomly shows up out of the blue behind us and grabs hold of me. Dave, by this stage, is completely petrified and runs away crying and climbs over a fence, completely ditching me. The guy is very casual despite being creepy, and I'm not as freaked out as I should be. I assume he's a provie, which is someone who watches the streets in West Belfast. He's got a hold of me, and it's like when you've been caught in a place you shouldn't be in. I expect to just be like, "You shouldn't be here at night while we're patrolling the streets," or something like that. But suddenly we go to a house which isn't completely built yet, and nobody lives in it. Well, I think. I'm literally standing inside the basement-looking house whilst he's outside phoning the cops. I assume he's fake calling the cops. The conversation just sounded fake, and he sounds like he's just trying to scare me, and he is. I get really freaked out though, because upstairs there's like this constant tapping sound, and it can't be a builder by himself at like 11 p.m. surely. It sounded like someone locked in something trying to get out, and that terrified me. It was the speed of the sound, and as if they knew I was in the house. It sounded like they were trapped upstairs or something. Suddenly he's off the phone and he's like, "Okay, the cops are coming to your house soon. Get out of here." I'm thinking, no, not really. I didn't give you my address. But at the same time I was freaking out because maybe this guy knows the streets and maybe he knows where I live. So that entire night I was just looking at my window hoping no cops would come. They didn't in the end, and he obviously did all of that just to scare me, but why? This situation for me is scary because a guy randomly grabbing a hold of you in the street in pitch black darkness is freaky regardless of whether or not it's a building site, and I probably shouldn't have been there. He could have put me in a room and locked the door, had someone torture me or something. I've always wondered, like, why was he there? What was he doing? Afterwards, I was scared to go out at night in the area unless I had someone with me. Truth be told, there were a lot of issues in the area, and I'm guessing that guy and a bunch of other guys were acting like undercover cops since the cops weren't usually comfortable coming up to where I lived since they'd usually get bricked. It comes from the troubles, and looking back though, I think the entrance was blocked off and we weren't actually allowed in there. Considering the situation, I was actually pretty calm compared to my friend, and I do have terrible anxiety. I think I just assumed that this guy wasn't bad, but again, on any given day, he could have been something much more sinister. I really don't know how to fully digest what had happened. Obviously nowhere near as freaky as some of the stories here, but the sound upstairs, I just can't shake the fact that it sounded like someone was trapped up there, begging to be let out.
I live in Finland, in a fairly small city, and this happened to me a year ago when I was only 14. So it was Friday evening, and every Friday our mom lets us go to the store and buy candy. So me and my 12-year-old sister left our house to go to the store, and it was already dark outside. We made our way to the closest store, which was over a mile away. While walking at some point, there's a man behind us walking the same way. But I didn't think much about it at the time. He could be just going to the same store. So I continued chatting with my sister while the man is behind us, following at a safe distance. We get to the store with no complications, and the man followed us into the store. We take our time selecting our candy and get to the register to pay. While I was packing the candy into my backpack, I saw this man buying only a chocolate bar. Pretty far away to go for a chocolate bar, I thought, and at this point, my suspicions started to rise for this guy. I get out of the store with my sister, and we start making our way back. We walked for a while, and I quickly glanced at my back, and the man was still there following us. I took a look at my sister, who seemed totally unaware about the man's presence. We continued our walk, and up ahead of us was an unlit dirt road that continued for a good part of the trip. So I look at my back again, and there the man still was, about 60 feet away. At this point, I was almost certain that he was following us, because on our way to the store, he did not walk this part of the way behind us. The dirt road goes through a forest, and it had a curve at the start of it. Once we get to the curve, I look back again and notice that the man can't see us. So I pull my sister into the woods and we duck down into the brush. My sister is saying something and I just whisper, "Stay quiet," to her as I wait for the man to come. I could see the man's shadow coming down the road, and he started looking for us from the road. He walked back and forth on the road. Now I was certain he was following us all that time. My heart was racing, and I tried to be as quiet as possible. The man didn't find us, but continued running forwards. We stayed in the forest for a while before getting the courage to come out. We walked the rest of the way home with no problems and get to our house. We eat our candy and have a good evening, but that really did bother me for a while, and it especially bothered my sister. Thinking about this still gives me the chills, and the thought of getting caught by that man in that situation creeps me out to no end, and I try not to think about it. Needless to say, I wouldn't want to meet this guy ever again.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in huge compilations and save on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.